You know what they say about karma. Sometimes it needs a little help finding its way. Today I'm sharing a story about a mother who watched her son's wife destroy everything she held dear. Her home, her family, her relationship with her grandson. But this mother had one weapon her daughter-in-law never saw coming. Patience. And when the time was right, she used it to deliver the most satisfying comeuppance you'll ever hear. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Don't forget to subscribe because stories like this don't come around every day. Evelyn Bieber stood in the doorway of what used to be her Kit Bieber, watching her daughter-in-law rearrange the spice rack for the third time this month. The young woman had opinions about everything. The way Evelyn organized her pantry, the outdated appliances, even the color of the walls that had remained unchanged for 20 years. "These herbs are so old, Evelyn," Jessica announced without looking up, tossing half the bottles into a garbage bag. "Some of these expired 2 years ago. How do you even cook with this stuff?" Evelyn bit her tongue, the same way she'd been doing for the past 18 months since Jessica moved into her home. The house had belonged to Evelyn's family for 3 generations. She'd raised her son Daniel here, nursed her late husband through his final illness in the upstairs bedroom, and tended the garden that was now Jessica's latest project. "I use fresh herbs from the garden mostly," Evelyn replied quietly, watching Jessica dump her mother's vintage oregano into the trash. That oregano had been a housewarming gift from her best friend 30 years ago. "Well, we need to modernize everything if we're going to raise Emma here properly," Jessica continued, referring to her 6-month-old daughter. "This whole Kit Bieber needs updating." Danielle agrees with me. Of course Danielle agreed. These days, her son agreed with everything his wife said, even when it meant dismantling everything Evelyn had built. The transformation had been gradual but relentless. First, Jessica had suggested they move in temporarily to save money for their own place. Then came the complaints about the furniture being too formal, the wallpaper too busy, the whole house too cluttered with old-fashioned things. Evelyn remembered when Danielle brought home a different girl, Sabrina Williams, a sweet nursing student who used to help Evelyn with her garden every weekend. Sabrina would spend hours learning about the different plants, asking about family recipes, genuinely interested in Evelyn's stories about the house's history. Evelyn had already started imagining Sabrina as a daughter-in-law, picturing future grandchildren playing in the same backyard where Danielle had grown up. But that was before Danielle met his business partner, Henry Torres. Henry had walked into Danielle's struggling web design company with big dreams and bigger promises. Within months, they'd expanded their client base and hired their first employee, Jessica Walsh, a marketing coordinator with an MBA and ambitions that filled every room she entered. The change in Danielle had been swift and devastating. Suddenly, Sabrina seemed too simple, too content with small dreams. Jessica represented everything Danielle thought he wanted: sophistication, drive, and the kind of confidence that made him feel like he was finally becoming the man he was meant to be. Sabrina had cried in Evelyn's Kit Bieber the day Danielle broke up with her, clutching a cup of tea with shaking hands. "I don't understand what happened, Mrs. Bieber. We were making plans together. We talked about getting married after I finished school." Evelyn had held the girl while she sobbed, knowing exactly what had happened, but unable to explain how quickly a woman like Jessica could rewrite a man's entire understanding of what he wanted from life. Within 4 months, Jessica was pregnant. Within 6 months, she and Danielle were married in a courthouse ceremony that felt more like a business transaction than a celebration of love. Jessica had insisted on something small and practical, claiming she didn't believe in wasting money on weddings when they had a baby coming and a business to build. The pregnancy had been Jessica's golden ticket into the family, and she'd played it perfectly. Suddenly, every decision revolved around what was best for the baby. Evelyn's house wasn't just her home anymore. It was the future nursery, the family headquarters, the place where Jessica would build her empire. "We really need you to clear out that back bedroom," Jessica had announced during her 7th month of pregnancy. "I want to start setting up the nursery, and all those old photo albums and books are just taking up space." Those photo albums contained 4 decades of family memories. The books were first editions that Evelyn's mother had collected. But Jessica had a way of making every request sound reasonable, every refusal seem selfish. Danielle had started spending more time at the office, working late with Henry on new projects that always seemed to require evening meetings and weekend strategy sessions. When he was home, he was exhausted and distracted, more interested in Jessica's plans for their future than in maintaining any connection to his past. The final blow had come 3 months after Emma was born. Evelyn had been living in her own home like a guest, tiptoeing around Jessica's postpartum moods and constantly changing rules about noise levels, visiting hours, and household routines. "I think it would be better for everyone if you found your own place," Jessica had said one morning while Evelyn was feeding Emma her bottle. "The baby needs consistency, and having 3 adults in the house is just too chaotic." Evelyn had stared at her daughter-in-law, holding the granddaughter she'd fallen completely in love with, and realized she was being evicted from her own home by a woman who'd been living there for less than 2 years. "This is my house, Jessica." "Was your house," Jessica corrected gently, using the tone people use when explaining obvious things to confused children. "Danielle and I are married now. We're a family. And families need space to grow without outside interference." The conversation with Danielle had been brief and brutal. He'd come home from another late meeting with Henry, exhausted and irritable, to find Evelyn waiting in the living room with 2 suitcases packed. "Mom, what's this about?" "Ask your wife," Evelyn had replied, too hurt and angry to soften the blow. "She's decided I'm interfering with your family's happiness." Danielle had rubbed his temples the way he used to do during college finals. "Look, maybe Jessica has a point. Maybe some space would be good for everyone. Just temporarily, until we figure out our long-term plans." Evelyn had looked at her son, this man she'd raised alone after his father died, this boy she'd sacrificed everything to put through college, this adult who couldn't even make eye contact while asking his mother to leave her own home, and realized she didn't recognize him anymore. The apartment she'd found was cramped and expensive, located 40 minutes away from the house where her granddaughter was learning to crawl. Evelyn's visits were now scheduled and supervised, reduced to awkward 2-hour sessions where Jessica hovered nearby, monitoring every interaction. "Emma needs her routine," Jessica would say whenever Evelyn tried to extend a visit or suggest taking the baby for a walk. "Too much stimulation isn't good for her development." Evelyn had spent the first month in her new apartment crying every night, grieving not just the loss of her home but the loss of her son. The Danielle she'd raised would never have allowed this to happen. That Danielle had been kind, thoughtful, and fiercely protective of the people he loved. But as the weeks passed, Evelyn's grief began transforming into something sharper and more focused. She started paying attention to details she'd missed before, the way Jessica's eyes lit up when Henry called, the frequency of his visits to the house when Danielle was traveling for work, the subtle changes in Jessica's behavior whenever Henry was around. Something was wrong with this picture, and Evelyn was going to figure out what it was. During one of her supervised visits, Emma had babbled something that made Evelyn's blood run cold. The baby was playing with blocks on the floor while Jessica checked her phone, and Evelyn was helping stack the colorful pieces into towers. "Dada," Emma said clearly, pointing toward the front window. Evelyn followed her gaze and saw Henry's silver sedan pulling into the driveway. Danielle wasn't supposed to be home for hours. He was meeting clients across town. But Henry was arriving for what appeared to be a planned visit. "Uncle Henry comes to play," Emma continued in her limited vocabulary, clapping her hands excitedly. "Uncle Henry." Evelyn watched Jessica's face flush as she quickly scooped up the baby, cutting the visit short with excuses about nap time and errands. That night, Evelyn sat in her tiny apartment and made a decision that would change everything. If her son wouldn't listen to her concerns, if he was too blinded by Jessica's manipulation to see what was happening in his own home, then Evelyn would have to find another way to protect her family. She was going to discover the truth about Jessica and Henry. And when she did, she was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of woman had stolen her son's life and her family's home. The war was just beginning. Evelyn's new routine began the next morning. She drove past the house 3 times that week, noting the pattern that was becoming impossible to ignore. Henry's car appeared in her former driveway every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, always when Danielle was scheduled to be out of the office meeting clients. The first time might have been coincidence. The second time could have been business. But by the fourth week, Evelyn knew she was witnessing something that had nothing to do with web design or marketing strategies. Emma's innocent words echoed in her mind during sleepless nights in her cramped bedroom. Uncle Henry comes to play. Children don't lie about what they observe. They simply report the world as they see it, without the filters adults use to protect themselves from uncomfortable truths. Evelyn started keeping a notebook, documenting every detail she could remember. The way Jessica's voice changed when she talked about Henry during family dinners. How she always seemed to know details about his personal life that seemed inappropriate for a business relationship. The expensive jewelry Jessica had started wearing. Pieces that were far beyond what Danielle's income could support. The breakthrough came during Emma's first birthday party, an elaborate celebration that Jessica had planned with the precision of a military operation. Evelyn arrived early to help set up, hoping to spend extra time with her granddaughter before the other guests arrived. "Henry's bringing the cake," Jessica announced while adjusting flowers in the dining room. "He insisted on ordering it from that expensive bakery downtown. You know how thoughtful he is." Evelyn paused while hanging streamers. "That's generous of him. Where's Danielle?" "Still at the office. He's been so stressed lately with the new clients. Henry told him to take his time, that we could handle the party preparations." Jessica's tone was casual, but something about the way she avoided eye contact made Evelyn's instincts sharpen. When Henry arrived with an elaborate 3-tier cake that must have cost more than Evelyn's monthly grocery budget, he greeted Jessica with a kiss on the cheek that lasted several seconds too long. Evelyn watched from the Kit Bieber doorway as Jessica's hand lingered on Henry's arm, their conversation conducted in the low, intimate tones of people sharing secrets. "Evelyn." Henry noticed her observing them and quickly stepped away from Jessica. "Great to see you. How's the new apartment working out?" "Fine," Evelyn replied, studying his face for any sign of guilt or discomfort. Henry Torres had always been smooth, the kind of man who could sell ice to polar bears. But today there was something different in his demeanor, a nervous energy that hadn't been there before. Danielle arrived just as the other guests were gathering, apologizing profusely for being late and completely missing the tension that had filled the room moments earlier. Evelyn watched her son hug his wife, oblivious to the way Jessica's eyes drifted toward Henry even while accepting Danielle's kiss. During the party, Evelyn positioned herself strategically, observing interactions while pretending to focus on Emma's attempts to walk between furniture pieces. What she saw confirmed her worst suspicions. Henry and Jessica moved around each other with the unconscious coordination of people who had spent significant time together. When Jessica needed something from a high shelf, Henry was there before she asked. When Henry wanted a drink refilled, Jessica anticipated his request. They shared inside jokes that made Danielle laugh along without understanding the subtext, and they communicated with glances that spoke volumes about their comfort level with deception. The most damning moment came when Emma toddled toward Henry with her arms outstretched, clearly expecting to be picked up. Henry scooped her up naturally, and Emma settled against his chest with the familiarity of a child who knew this routine well. "She really loves her Uncle Henry," one of the guests commented. "Kids have good instincts about people," Jessica replied, but Evelyn caught the quick look she exchanged with Henry, a look that lasted just long enough to confirm what Evelyn had begun to suspect. After the party, Evelyn sat in her car in the parking lot of a nearby shopping center, hands shaking as she processed what she'd witnessed. This wasn't just an affair. The timing, Emma's comfort with Henry, the way Jessica deflected questions about Emma's early development. Everything pointed to a deception that went much deeper than adultery. She needed proof. Real, undeniable evidence that would force Danielle to see what she could see. But how do you prove something that people are actively working to hide? The answer came from an unexpected source. Evelyn's neighbor in the apartment complex, Linda Rodriguez, was a retired police officer who'd spent 30 years investigating domestic cases. Over coffee one morning, Evelyn found herself sharing more than she'd intended about her family situation, with the kind of public revelation that would make denial impossible and revenge complete. The birthday party was going to be very memorable indeed. The plan came together with military precision over the next 2 weeks. Evelyn had purchased a small digital projector online, the kind used for business presentations, and spent hours learning how to connect it to her laptop. She practiced the setup in her apartment until she could have the system running in under 30 seconds. Lucas Morrison had delivered the complete investigation file on a Friday afternoon, a thick manila envelope containing photographs, video files, audio transcripts, and financial documents that painted a devastating picture of betrayal. Evelyn spread everything across her Kit Bieber table and studied each piece of evidence like a general preparing for battle. The photos were damning enough. Jessica and Henry entering the Riverside Hotel within minutes of each other. The same pair sharing intimate dinners at restaurants 40 minutes from town, where they thought no one would recognize them. Henry's hand on Jessica's back as he guided her into his car, the gesture casual and possessive. But the video footage was nuclear-level devastating. Lucas had managed to capture clear audio and visual of a conversation between Jessica and Henry in his car outside the hotel, where they discussed their future plans with the callous calculation of people who had already decided other people's fates. Danielle's so focused on the business right now, he barely notices what's happening at home. Jessica's voice was crystal clear on the recording. After Emma's 2nd birthday, I'll start the divorce proceedings. By then, Henry's situation will be finalized, and we can make our move. What about the house? Henry's voice responded. I've been documenting everything that needs updating, all the complaints about Evelyn's old-fashioned style. My lawyer says I can claim the property needs significant investment to be suitable for raising a child. Danielle will either have to buy me out or sell. Evelyn had listened to that conversation 5 times, each replay stoking her anger higher. These people weren't just having an affair, they were systematically planning the destruction of her son's entire life. The financial documents were equally shocking. Henry had been moving money out of their joint business accounts for months, creating separate accounts and investment portfolios that only he controlled. When the business partnership inevitably collapsed, Danielle would be left with nothing while Henry walked away with everything they'd built together. Danielle's birthday party was scheduled for Saturday evening. Jessica had invited 30 people, mostly her friends and professional contacts, along with a few of Danielle's old college buddies who had somehow survived Jessica's systematic purge of his social circle. Evelyn was invited, of course. It would look suspicious if the birthday boy's mother wasn't there. I thought we could do a slideshow of family photos, Jessica had mentioned during their brief phone conversation about party planning. You know, celebrating Danielle's journey from childhood to successful businessman and father. The irony was perfect. A slideshow celebrating Danielle's life, presented by the woman who was actively working to destroy it. That sounds lovely, Evelyn had replied. I'd be happy to help with the technical setup if you need it. Oh, that would be wonderful. You always were so good with electronics. Evelyn smiled grimly. She was about to become very good with electronics indeed. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm weather, perfect for the garden party Jessica had planned. Evelyn arrived early, carrying a small overnight bag that Jessica assumed contained family photo albums and her laptop. Evelyn, thank you so much for coming early, Jessica greeted her at the front door, wearing a flowing sundress that probably cost more than Evelyn's monthly rent. The caterers just left, and I want to make sure everything is perfect before the guests arrive. Evelyn looked around what used to be her living room, now decorated with white and gold balloons and streamers that transformed the space into something unrecognizable. Her grandmother's antique dining table groaned under the weight of an elaborate spread that must have cost a fortune. Where would you like me to set up the slideshow equipment? Evelyn asked, her voice carefully neutral. Oh, anywhere that gives everyone a good view. Maybe near the television? Henry said he'd help with the technical stuff, but he's running late. Of course Henry was involved in the slideshow plans. Evelyn wondered if he'd offered to help because he wanted to control what photos were shown, or if he simply couldn't resist inserting himself into every aspect of Danielle's life. I brought my own projector, Evelyn said, unpacking her equipment. The image quality is much better than using the television screen. She connected her laptop to the projector with practiced efficiency, testing the setup to make sure everything worked properly. Her presentation was ready, a folder containing the family photos Jessica expected, and another folder containing the evidence that would destroy Jessica's carefully constructed facade. Danielle arrived home from a morning golf game looking genuinely happy for the first time in months. He hugged Evelyn warmly, and for a moment she felt a stab of guilt about what she was about to do to his birthday celebration. "Mom, I'm really glad you could make it," he said, and she could hear the exhaustion under his cheerful tone. "I know things have been complicated lately." Complicated was certainly one way to describe watching your wife systematically betray you while planning your financial and emotional destruction. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Evelyn replied, hugging him back. "I hope this turns out to be a birthday you'll never forget." The guests began arriving at 6 o'clock, Jessica's friends from her marketing job, a few neighbors, Henry's wife Carmen, who looked miserable and kept checking her phone, and several people Evelyn didn't recognize but who seemed to know Jessica very well. Henry arrived fashionably late, carrying an expensive bottle of wine and greeting Jessica with a kiss on the cheek that lasted just long enough to make Evelyn's skin crawl. He was all smiles and charm, working the room like a politician at a fundraiser. "Evelyn," he approached her with his trademark grin. "Jessica tells me you're handling our slideshow tonight. That's so generous of you." "It's my pleasure," Evelyn replied sweetly. "I've put together something really special for Danielle. I think everyone's going to be very surprised." Henry's smile flickered for just a moment, but he recovered quickly. "I'm sure it'll be wonderful. Family photos are always so meaningful." Evelyn excused herself to check on Emma, who was playing in the backyard under the supervision of a teenage babysitter Jessica had hired for the evening. The little girl ran to Evelyn with the same enthusiasm she'd always shown, and Evelyn's heart clenched as she wondered whether she was about to discover that Emma wasn't actually her granddaughter. "Grandma Maggie." Emma wrapped her small arms around Evelyn's legs. "Uncle Henry brought me a present." "Did he?" Evelyn managed to keep her voice level. "That was very thoughtful of him. He always brings me presents when Daddy's not home," Emma continued innocently, the way children do when they haven't learned that some information should be kept private. Evelyn knelt down to Emma's level, fighting to keep her expression neutral. "Does Uncle Henry visit often when Daddy's not home?" "Aha. He and Mommy have special lunch dates in the big dining room. Sometimes they dance to music when they think I'm napping." Dancing to music during special lunch dates. Evelyn felt her resolve harden into something unbreakable. These people had been conducting their affair in the house where her granddaughter lived, treating the child like an accessory to their deception. The party moved into full swing as the sun began to set. Jessica had outdone herself with the decorations and catering, creating the kind of elegant celebration that would generate dozens of social media posts. Evelyn watched the guests laughing and chatting, most of them completely unaware that they were about to witness the destruction of their host's marriage. Carmen Torres sat alone at a corner table, nursing a glass of wine and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Evelyn approached her during a lull in the conversation. "Carmen, isn't it? I'm Evelyn, Danielle's mother." "Oh yes." Carmen's smile was tired but genuine. "It's nice to finally meet you. Henry mentions your family often." "I'm sure he does," Evelyn replied carefully. "How are things going with your situation?" Carmen's face crumpled slightly. "It's been difficult. The divorce proceedings, the custody arrangements for the kids. Henry's been... well, it's been a challenging time." Evelyn felt a surge of sympathy for this woman who was also a victim of Henry's pattern of destruction. "I'm sorry you're going through this." "Thank you. Sometimes I wonder if I should have seen the signs earlier, you know? But when someone you trust is lying to your face every day, it's hard to believe what your instincts are telling you." Evelyn nodded, understanding exactly what Carmen meant. Sometimes the people closest to us are the last to see the truth. At 8 o'clock, Jessica called for everyone's attention. "Before we cut the cake, I thought we could watch a little slideshow that Evelyn put together, celebrating Danielle's wonderful life and all the people who love him." Evelyn stood up slowly, her heart pounding but her hands steady. This was it. The moment when everything would change forever. "I've put together something very special for Danielle's birthday," she announced to the gathered crowd. "A presentation about the people in his life, and the relationships that have shaped who he is today." She clicked to start the slideshow, and the first images appeared on the wall. Innocent family photos of Danielle as a child, graduation pictures, happy moments that made the guests smile and nod approvingly. "Danielle has always been someone who trusts completely," Evelyn continued, advancing through the photos. "He sees the best in people, sometimes even when they don't deserve it." More photos appeared, Danielle with Sabrina, looking genuinely happy during their 3-year relationship. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, remembering Danielle's previous girlfriend and wondering why she was being featured at his birthday party. "But sometimes trust can be misplaced," Evelyn continued, her voice steady and clear. "Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us the deepest." She clicked to the next slide, and the room fell completely silent. The photograph showed Jessica and Henry in Henry's car outside the Riverside Hotel, locked in an embrace that was unmistakably passionate and intimate. The image was crystal clear, date-stamped, and absolutely undeniable. "What the hell is this?" Danielle's voice cut through the silence like a whip. Evelyn advanced to the next slide, another photo of Jessica and Henry entering the hotel together, followed by images of them at romantic dinners, holding hands across restaurant tables, sharing kisses in parking lots. "This is the truth," Evelyn said calmly, watching Jessica's face cycle through shock, panic, and rage in rapid succession. "This is what's been happening every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon for the past 8 months, while you've been working to support your family." The chaos that erupted was immediate and explosive. Jessica lunged toward Evelyn, trying to grab the laptop, but Henry caught her arm, pulling her back with a hiss of, "Don't make this worse." "Turn it off," Jessica screamed, her carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time. "Turn it off right now." But Evelyn was just getting started. She clicked to the next slide, a video file that began playing automatically. The room heard Jessica's voice, crystal clear through the projector's speakers. "Danielle's so focused on the business right now, he barely notices what's happening at home." Danielle stood frozen in the center of his own birthday party, watching his wife discuss their divorce plans with his business partner like they were planning a vacation. The color drained from his face as Henry's voice responded through the speakers, discussing the house, the money, the systematic destruction of everything Danielle had worked to build. 8 months, Danielle finally spoke, his voice barely audible. 8 months of this. Carmen Torres had risen from her corner table, her face a mask of grim satisfaction. "Actually, Danielle, it's been longer than that. Much longer." She walked to the center of the room, addressing the stunned guests like a prosecutor delivering closing arguments. "My husband has been having affairs throughout our entire marriage. Jessica is just his latest victim or accomplice, depending on how you look at it." "Carmen, don't," Henry warned, but his wife had clearly reached her breaking point. "No, Henry. These people deserve to know what they're dealing with." She turned to face Danielle directly. "Your business partner has a pattern. He targets married women in professional relationships, destroys their marriages, takes whatever he can get, and moves on. He did it in Phoenix, he did it in Denver, and now he's doing it here." Evelyn advanced the slideshow to the financial documents Lucas had uncovered. Bank statements, account transfers, investment records, all showing Henry's systematic theft of business assets over the past 6 months. "He's been stealing from you, Danielle," Evelyn said quietly. "Moving money out of your joint accounts, setting up investments in his name only. When this all falls apart, he walks away with everything you've built together." Danielle's business partner and best friend had finally found his voice. "Danielle, man, this is all taken out of context. Your mother hired someone to spy on us, to create problems where none existed." "Problems where none existed." Danielle turned to face Henry, and Evelyn could see her son's rage building like a gathering storm. "You're sleeping with my wife. You're stealing from our business. What context makes that acceptable?" Henry glanced toward the exit, clearly calculating his chances of escape, but several of the male guests had positioned themselves between him and the door. The birthday party had transformed into something resembling a trial, with 30 witnesses and damning evidence projected on the wall. The financial theft alone is enough for criminal charges, Carmen continued, her voice steady and cold. But there's something else Danielle needs to know. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. She had suspected, but hearing Carmen confirm it was still devastating. Emma isn't your daughter, Danielle. She's Henry's. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Jessica finally found her voice, shrieking denials that sounded desperate even to her own ears. That's a lie. Carmen's just trying to hurt us because she's bitter about the divorce. DNA doesn't lie, Carmen replied calmly. I demanded paternity tests for all of Henry's suspected affairs as part of our divorce proceedings. Emma is Henry's biological daughter. Danielle sank into the nearest chair as if his legs could no longer support him. The little girl he'd loved since birth, the daughter he'd stayed awake with during sleepless nights, the child he'd proudly carried on his shoulders through parks and playgrounds, she wasn't his. Evelyn felt tears burning behind her eyes as she watched her son process the complete destruction of everything he'd believed about his life. But the truth, no matter how painful, was better than living a lie. I want everyone out, Danielle said quietly. Everyone except my mother. The guests began filing out in stunned silence, many of them pulling out phones to call friends and family with news of the most dramatic party they'd ever attended. Jessica and Henry found themselves escorted to the door by several of Danielle's college friends, who made it clear they weren't welcome to return. Carmen paused beside Evelyn as she prepared to leave. Thank you for doing what I couldn't, she said quietly. Henry needs to face consequences for once in his life. What happens now? Evelyn asked. Now I take everything he has left, and my lawyer files criminal charges for the business fraud. Henry's going to learn what it feels like to lose everything he's worked for. After the last guest had left, Evelyn found herself alone with Danielle in the house that felt like home again for the first time in 2 years. Her son sat at the Kit Bieber table, staring at the financial documents spread across the surface. I'm sorry, he said without looking up. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I chose them over you. I'm sorry I let them take your house and your family and everything you cared about. Evelyn sat down across from him, reaching for his hands. You don't need to apologize for being betrayed, sweetheart. That's not your fault. But I should have seen it. All the signs were there, and I ignored them because I wanted to believe I'd found something special. Love makes us blind sometimes. And people like Jessica and Henry are very good at manipulation. They've had practice. Danielle was quiet for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what he'd discovered. What do I do about Emma? She's not biologically mine, but I've been her father for 18 months. I love her. That's something you'll have to work out with lawyers and social workers, Evelyn said gently. But Danielle, love isn't about biology. It's about commitment and care and showing up every day. If you want to fight for your relationship with Emma, I'll support you completely. And if Jessica tries to use her as a weapon in the divorce, then we'll deal with that too, together. Over the following weeks, the legal machinery began turning with ruthless efficiency. Jessica filed for divorce, demanding half of everything despite the documented evidence of her adultery. Henry was arrested for embezzlement and fraud, facing both criminal charges and civil lawsuits from multiple victims. The custody battle for Emma was complicated and heartbreaking. Jessica initially tried to cut off Danielle's access completely, claiming he had no legal rights to a child who wasn't biologically his. But 18 months of documented parenting, combined with Henry's criminal charges and Jessica's adultery, created a legal situation that favored Danielle's petition for continued custody. The court recognizes that Danielle Bieber has been Emma's primary father figure since birth, the family court judge ruled after weeks of testimony. The biological father is facing criminal charges and has shown no interest in parental responsibilities. It is in the child's best interest to maintain her relationship with the man who has been her de facto father. Jessica was granted primary custody, but Danielle received generous visitation rights and the legal standing to remain in Emma's life. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than losing her completely. The business was salvaged through bankruptcy proceedings that allowed Danielle to rebuild without Henry's stolen assets. Several clients stayed with him, impressed by his integrity in handling the crisis and his commitment to making things right. Evelyn moved back into her family home on a crisp October morning, 6 months after the birthday party that had changed everything. Danielle had insisted on renovating the master bedroom and updating the Kit Bieber, not because Jessica's complaints had been valid, but because he wanted his mother to feel comfortable in a space that was truly hers again. "It feels different," Evelyn said, standing in her restored living room where family photos had replaced Jessica's modern art and her grandmother's furniture had been returned to its proper places. "Different how?" Danielle asked, helping her arrange books on the shelves that had been cleared to make room for Jessica's things. "Peaceful. Like the house can breathe again." They worked together in comfortable silence, rebuilding not just the physical space but their relationship. The experience had changed both of them. Danielle was more cautious now, slower to trust, but also more appreciative of the people who had proven their loyalty. Evelyn felt a quiet satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with protecting the people she loved. Emma visited every other weekend, and the little girl adapted to the changes with the resilience children possess. She still called Evelyn Grandma Maggie, and still ran to Danielle with the same enthusiasm she'd always shown. Biology might determine genetics, but love determines family. Jessica remarried within a year, not to Henry, who was serving a 2-year sentence for financial crimes, but to an older man who owned a string of successful restaurants and seemed willing to support her expensive tastes. Evelyn wished her no specific harm, but she didn't wish her well either. Some people create their own consequences. Henry's pattern of destruction had finally caught up with him. Criminal charges in 3 states, multiple civil lawsuits, and a reputation that made him unemployable in any industry that required trust. Carmen had rebuilt her life with their 2 children, using Henry's seized assets to start a consulting business that was thriving. On a warm spring evening, almost 2 years after the birthday party, Evelyn sat on her front porch watching Danielle push Emma on the swing set he'd installed in the backyard. The little girl's laughter carried across the garden where Evelyn's flowers were blooming again after years of neglect. "Higher, Daddy," Emma called out, using the title that had nothing to do with genetics and everything to do with love. Evelyn smiled, remembering the dark months when she'd thought she'd lost her family forever. Sometimes protecting the people you love requires you to become the villain in their story, at least temporarily. Sometimes the truth is so painful that people need time to forgive you for revealing it. But sitting here now, watching her son and granddaughter create new memories in the garden where 4 generations of her family had played, Evelyn knew she'd made the right choice. Family isn't about perfection or avoiding conflict. It's about fighting for each other, even when the fight is ugly and painful and costs more than you want to pay. The truth had set them free, just not in the way anyone had expected. And that was enough. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about families who fought for each other and won. Because sometimes the good guys really do finish first. They just have to be willing to get their hands dirty along the way.